I left the Corker School with all the sophisticated figurative paintings, and I did primitive paintings. Those, they're upstairs, but they were really primitive. And those are the things that I used to take to Loren, and he thought they were wonderful.
Primitive as in prehistoric cave art from Lascaux?
That's what I loved. I loved primitive art. And I would take out these books and copy the frescoes. It's all kind of, I didn't have any high and mighty ideas of Dada. All I knew was surrealism was a no-no at that time. And I was trying to get Loren's approval, and what did he like, and yet I was fighting against what he liked and what he tore apart in my work. But he didn't tear apart the primitive ones. Primitive was what I was doing when I came.
Yes, I took Art 2A with Earl Loren in my first semester.
And Art 2A is supposed to achieve what? What are the goals of that course?
Well, he never said, but looking back on it, the goal was to, I'll use the word train, although I don't think he would use that word, educate whatever the student for an awareness of formal values, formal structure, formal order. The word is form. And as we were talking before about content, there isn't any. The purpose of that course, and ultimately I came to believe they felt, the purpose of art is to, well, yeah, is to organize the world, visual, to organize the visual world according to basic principles of spatial, the picture box, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so the issue is that in the year before that, I was just going through my existential adventures and had gone to the local public library. Since I'm going to be an artist, well, I better read up on art. And I got a book published by the Delphian Society about modern art, and I read that. And now, in talking about that book, I can only see the part that mattered to me, which is only a couple pages, you know, but the part that mattered, I had this piece about Faustian man who will ever aspire and never be satisfied, and a piece about Kandinsky, and I just took off on that. So I land in Earl's class, and well, that's not his thing at all. So, anyhow, the things he tried to get us to do and tried to get us to see and tried to get, anyhow, I kind of crashed my way through that. The one I remember was we were going to do cross-hatching, so I made a cubist figure cross-hatched. And anyway, at the end of all that, I got a C, and as I said in those notes, well, proved my belief that he was an asshole. So that ended that.
This is the class where you start by setting up a still life?
He would set up still life, yeah. Yeah.
And then you had graded.
It's a
series of sequence.
Yeah, very carefully sequenced lessons.
Yeah.
Which I do now when I teach, and even including some of those lessons. There are sort of two ways of teaching art. One is, oh, you're also creative, do something, and I'll tell you if I like it. The other is that I think the students feel better, most of them, if you say, okay. And I learned this when I was getting my teaching credential. The guy that was teaching English said, and he was teaching us how to teach English, sort of. Teaching is a transitive verb. I teach you this. I'm taking this and giving it to you. And students, I think, feel better. They're getting something. Maybe they didn't like it, which what we did yesterday they didn't like, but just the same, they knew what it was. I could demonstrate it. I could even yesterday go around and mark on their drawings, pointing out, you know, there's no soul in this drawing. I set this up. We're just adding 2 and 2 and getting 4. Well, you got 5. Look, that's where you got the 5. So I did learn that. And I use some of Earl's exercises now, except the difference is we are going to do vanishing point perspective, which he denounced as a heresy and a sin and should never have happened, but we're going to do that next week.
We all had been playing around with space. And space is very hard to define. And according to all those diagrams, it's non-static. It's not one plane right on top of another plane. It's an angle, and it's a tension between 2 objects. But you can know that and play around with all those objects and think you know what space is. But I had the same experience that everybody else did, is that it took a couple of years to really realize what space was. And we all knew that it wasn't perspective space, that it was confined within a picture plane. But it's very hard to get. And in the concept, it was very hard. Right now, it doesn't seem like such a difficult concept to get. But I remember in Haley's class, although I really learned it from Lauren, I yelled out, "Oh, so that's what space is," right out loud. And Haley was absolutely thrilled. Real art was an abstraction of space, line, volume, planes contained within the picture plane. Nothing could bounce out at you. But space is just one element of all those things. It's the crucial element. And that's the hardest thing to get. And I haven't thought about space for years. But it was an obsession, an absolute obsession in that department. I looked at that thing I did for Wessels last night, and I didn't think that the windows last night, after I don't know how many years, 40, 50 years, those windows didn't pop out at me.
But he said they did.
But he said they did. I think that they were after a uniformity. That's not in one of the drawings of Lauren's books, and that's not what Hans Hofmann was always talking about. But that was a very important part of the Berkeley School, that everything was kind of, had a, I can't remember the exact word, unity? Unity or something. This is where the window stuck out that Wessels was so upset about. That you see how this has the overall relationship of a unity, and how these are just isolated.
So unity would mean that the planes
circle around each other, or the
well,
linear?
Well, the unity really was a tonality. And that isn't really one of the principles, although they emphasize. See how this loses its tonality by having each individual one stick out. And they were I didn't mind that. I thought this was great. But Wessels did not like this at all. It really hurt my feelings. This was, I must have done this for O'Hagan's class. And this was an original Margaret O'Hagan.
So it looks like in the class she was trying to get the students to imitate her?
Absolutely. There really isn't that much difference, but this is the expert and this is the student. Can you see these little diagrams that the teacher would do on the side with the arrows to show the planes?
And how would that diagram then relate to what you had done in order to improve it?
Well, that was the point, that they were trying to improve it according to their principles. But I would have to really study. I look at this and I think it's a pretty good drawing for a student, don't you think so?
Mm-hmm. So what, from the criticism, caustic or not, was that the drawing didn't do what?
I can't remember whether this was a compliment or a criticism. It's just like a hammer on you over and over again, that this is what this is supposed to convey. Now, it is erased a bit, so maybe I was trying to get that volume, the movement. You see, there isn't that, although I like this drawing, there isn't that, you see that arrow with the two planes. That's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Then I had, in my second year, Margaret O'Hagan for color, and that's when I decided art was something I could really do.
How did she set up problems for you?
Well, she started off, we had to buy every available color of watercolor. And in those days, they were 25 cents a tube, so it wasn't so terribly impossible. And it came to, I don't know, 12 or 15 different pigments. Then we had to take a sheet of paper and paint a solid color of each one on each sheet. And then we had to take every other color and paint it into that and see what color and shape did with each other. And it was terrific. I didn't know much about it at the time, I just did it. But it left me making abstract shapes that meant something, or not. But I haven't thought about it till this instant in that sense. It's the first step of, you might call it biomorphic abstraction, or whatever you wanted to do. You can make any kind of shape, but you're going to find out what yellow ochre does on top of cad red light. Yeah. And that this shape does it that way, and that shape does it another, and if you're near green, it's this way, and if you're near blue, it's that way. So it was really good.
So these are what we did as far as color.
Yeah.
And don't ask me what problem 2 was. But apparently there was something wrong with this painting because of those lines.
And those lines?
I don't know, but they weren't good. I mean...
They weren't? Why not?
Well, they didn't fit the...
I'm just trying to figure out what's the criteria. What were the criteria for...
For what was O'Hagan's criteria? It's very hard. You see, if you get a mass, let's say 8 students' work that had these rectangles and these spots and lines. The good ones, you can see the good ones come out. You're asking me what are good ones. I don't know, distribution of color, balance, originality. She would pick. But if you look at an isolated one like this, right now, 60 years later, you can't tell there's no context of whether this was good or bad. All I know is she was very upset with me. How come I did such wonderful work for Earl Loren and not for her?